Hi, I'm going to talk to you today about the rather contentious subject of fingering, and I'm going to talk about why I don't adopt the usual sort of rather dogmatic approach to teaching the piano using set fingering, with its rather odd rules that I think of as quite strange, like not putting thumbs on black keys or always playing kind of literally legato, finger legato, and passing your thumbs on certain notes in scales. I don't adhere to these. So in this video, I'm going to try and explain to you why I don't teach in that way, and what are the potential benefits of freeing yourself from thinking in terms of using the correct fingering. Okay, so let's start off by looking at a couple of examples. So this first example that you can see there is the same passage of music, but obviously with different fingering. So here's the first one. Absolutely fine. It follows the rules that are normally sort of talked about. It's got a proper legato thing going on. That not getting the thumb on the black key there is good. You've got your second finger going on the black key. Okay, so that follows those rules. Let's have a look at the second one. Now that breaks the rules, but it doesn't sound any different. In fact, it might even sound slightly better, because that rather odd thing, some people might think an odd thing of going from 5 to 5 from G to F there at the halfway point, I think feels rhythmically very, very natural. Some people might think, well, you won't be able to play it very fast. You can, because it's such a small distance, you can definitely jump from 5 to 5. Some people say you lose the legato, but I don't lose the legato because I have the pedal, and I'm dabbing the pedal to give it that nice legato coloration. Let's look at another. So I'm not saying it's better, that fingering. I'm just saying that, there are probably also all sorts of other fingerings that are possible. I just don't think we should always say there are rules or there's a correct way to finger something. And if somebody uses innovative fingering that suits them, that's fine. Let me give you another example. This is a piece of Rachmaninoff. So you've got that nice legato melody. So I don't literally play it legato, like finger legato. Pedal can make the legato. I don't have to do it with my fingers. I have to use my imagination to shape the music to create the legato, but I don't have to do literally a finger legato. And because there's so much else going on, that frees up my fingers to play the other stuff. If my fingers weren't free to play the other stuff, I would be forced to contort myself to try and keep those notes down whilst I play the other stuff. And I've actually been taught that way in this piece. I've had a teacher try and get me to do that, and it's very uncomfortable. It doesn't get particularly good results from me anyway. So you can see that they're just a couple of examples of how the rules probably don't apply all the time, if even very often. So if that's the case, then why does the myth exist that we should use fingers in a certain way to play the piano? Well, I think it's for very good reason in a way, because the intention behind, if you like, fingering is good, because the keyboard has to become like an extension of your body, rather like a tool, like a pen or a pencil. When we draw, it becomes an extension of the body. We sort of proprioceptively map the tool into our body. Or a tennis racket becomes an extension of the body. But tennis racket's rather a good example, because what you don't want with a tennis racket is a fixed grip. There isn't one way to hold a tennis racket. It may have been taught like that in the past. I wouldn't be surprised. I don't know enough about tennis to say, but I watch tennis players these days, and they seem to have a very soft grip that changes, so they get a lot of flexibility of angles and shots and strokes, so they play in a flexible way. And so it is with the keyboard. You've got 88 keys there. You've only got 10 fingers. You've got to be able to play them all. So you need that flexibility, and having a dogmatic approach to fingering obviously is going to stop that flexibility from happening. But you do still want to feel as if the keyboard is mapped into your body, that you know it. So you obviously have to develop that in a slightly different way. So obviously what I'm saying is that muscle memory is probably not the best way to play. And this is what I believe. I think what we should develop instead is musical memory. Now the keyboard has a three-dimensional structure that is your tonal structure. So you need to know the tonal structure of the piece of music that you're playing, and you need to know its rhythmic structure, so you coordinate all your movements very naturally and freely and comfortably over the keys. So, you know, thinking about fingering is a good idea. You don't want to contort yourself, like I was saying before, whether it's in order to comply with rules of fingering or because you're sort of just doing crazy things. You've got to find that comfortable relationship with the structure of the keyboard and feel that it's an extension of your body. And then you can develop musical memory rather than muscle memory. Muscle memory is kind of blind. You don't really necessarily know what you're playing. If I hear a piece of music that I've memorized in my mind, that's memory, obviously, but I could also imagine writing it out. Because if I hear a piece, because I'm fluent, if I hear it's something playing, some music playing, I can imagine it being written out, just as you can imagine the words I'm saying to you being written out. So that's true memory of a piece of music, and that's what I teach, not muscle memory. So let's have a think about improvisation. Improvisation, obviously, when it's sort of true improvisation, is composing in real time. So there's no way to know what fingers you're going to use. So improvisation that's built on sort of drilling the fingers into using scale patterns and stuff like that, to me isn't true improvising. It's not actually composing in real time. So whilst drilling certain finger patterns into your playing can improve the facility of your playing during improvising, I think it's actually not true improvising. So I would say that improvising is often the very best indicator of whether we understand musical patterns rather than just executing muscle-memorised finger patterns. So let me tell you a little story. When I was a child, up to the age of 14, so from 9 to 14, I was with a very strict teacher, and he would always insist on me using very set fingering. He was very dogmatic about it. So say I was playing an F minor scale, I would have to put my thumb under on the C, and so on. I just didn't do this. It just felt so unnatural to me. I would play all sorts of fingers. And I'd get into terrible trouble from him, and I'd find it more and more difficult to play scales, and I hated scales, but I could play them on my own, in my own way. I just played them like tunes, like that. It's just a little melody. And that's how I'd do them in the exam, and guess what? The examiner didn't notice that I'd used the wrong fingering. No examiner ever noticed that I used the wrong fingering, and I'd be nervous in an exam, so there was no way I could play it using the correct fingering. I go back to my way of thinking, which is the pattern through the keyboard. What am I saying? Am I saying that I was right and my teacher was wrong? I don't know. All I'm saying is I couldn't do what he wanted without it sort of ruining my playing. This really spilt over into the pieces where he was equally dogmatic and had me learn them hands separately and, you know, with the metronome and all that sort of thing, and set fingering. And I would find that the pieces would get more and more out of control. I just couldn't play them, and yet I could play things like Shopham ballads by ear and improvise very virtuosically, and yet I couldn't play these comparatively simple pieces for exams for my teacher because of the way that he taught them. So for the later grades, what I did was I cheated. I used to learn the pieces my way and sort of pretend that I was learning them his way, and I felt terrible, really. I felt like I was cheating. From the age of 14, I moved teachers, and I had a teacher that kind of celebrated a more fluent approach to making music. He kind of liked my way of doing it. It matched more his way of doing music. So So that was fine. But up to that age, it was a real struggle, a terrible struggle, because the way I was being taught to make music on the piano was so different, and fingering was a very big part of it. There was a lot of battles of him trying to get me to use the set fingering that he wanted me to, and I just couldn't. And it had a very negative impact on my playing when I did. So what about things like Chopin studies, where where a composer actually writes fingering in the score themselves? Surely then we're supposed to dogmatically stick to those fingering. Well, again, I don't think so. Certainly it's there for a reason, and we should sort of see what that reason is. So the reason that Chopin would suggest fingering, say for example in the study, say Opus 10 number 7, that fingering that he's suggesting points to a certain type of technique that was probably quite innovative at the time, where you're sort of changing fingers and you're getting a lot of speed and facility into your playing. So obviously, yeah, have a look at the fingering, try it out, and discover the technique, discover what it is he's teaching. But it's still really only suggested. I don't think you should ever regard any fingering as being set in stone, because we all have different sized and shaped hands, different lengths of fingers, different sized palm of the hands, and this sort of thing. So yeah, it's there for a good reason. It's to point to something technical, but it's not something to be followed dogmatically. So I'm coming really now to what is my most important point, and I've been sort of hinting at it, that when you pin your fingers to set positions, set patches of keys, you kind of become lost. You lose because it's muscle memory takes over. We can lose where we are in the structure of the keyboard, and therefore we lose the tonal structure. So if I play a scale with set fingering very, very fast, I can lose my sense of where I am in the keyboard, even though my body will do that, and it's kind of impressive in a way that the body can do that. It feels very detached from me. It feels very automatic pilot. I don't really feel as if I'm singing with my fingers, as I don't feel like I'm actually intending each sound moment by moment. And that's what fluency is. Fluency is moment by moment knowing where we are in the structure of rhythm and tonality, and that is, to me, far more important than simply executing a piece well. I want to actually understand that piece. So what that means is that I can play a piece that I know at different tempos, different dynamics. I'm not wedded to a set way of playing it, because my fingers are not lost. And that obviously that includes using different fingering. I can play the same piece. Each time it was different fingering, and it's fine, it doesn't make any difference to me, because I know the piece, I know the structure within the keyboard. So when I'm teaching beginners, I think this is particularly important. Often when people are first learning, they can actually almost play by numbers. They almost just play by 1, 2, 3, or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 if they're using all 5 fingers. So if we're using a 3-note block, those very simple C, D, and E, I teach people to split that block between the hands. Say 2 thumbs and 1 finger, maybe those 3 or those 3, it doesn't matter. Use separate hands sometimes, but this idea of pinning the fingers, I want it to be destroyed early, so that people really get the idea that they can play that block of notes with any fingers that they like, as long as it feels comfortable, as long as it feels like their fingers are walking on the keys, and it feels like part of the body, almost feels like an extension, a bit like when you walk on stairs and you don't really need to look or find the stairs, you just know. But it's that feeling that the structure is more important than the fingers. You're thinking of the structure of the keyboard, of that block of keys in the keyboard, and the sounds that go with them. So I hope you see that whilst I'm not set dead against thinking about fingering and suggesting fingering, and even practicing certain fingerings can be very, very useful, especially in studies and so forth. I hope you can see that there is a huge danger in our playing becoming kind of automatic pilot, kind of pure muscle memory, where we don't understand what we're playing. And if you've ever had that feeling that your playing feels out of control, or it's getting faster, or maybe it's getting slower, and it doesn't feel rhythmic, it doesn't feel free, and you don't feel like you're playing naturally, it could be that muscle memory and sort of pinning fingers is creeping in. So mess it up. Try using different fingering. Try to understand the pattern of the music that you're playing rather than just executing it.